Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. This edition of Hilaal Live, we're talking about spatial mismatch and public transport as well. Now, as the ripples of the taxi stay away blend with the underlying currents of societal dynamics, the one truth that remains stark is the spatial mismatch that carries a profound impact. Now, the threads of yesterday's struggles, and I'm speaking about the apartheid struggles, okay, are interwoven with the fabric of today's challenges, disproportionately affecting the working class and also the marginalized. Now, the taxi stay away exposed this. Now, to develop into an issue of spatial mismatch, the public transport has obviously highlighted issues that we have faced in the Western Cape, but more importantly throughout the country as well. Now, to get a better idea on what I'm speaking about, let's have a watch at this video.
After days of violent protests by striking taxi drivers,
we are on the forced lockdown and we are unable to go to any shopping center because it's too dangerous to do so. We are unable to take kids to crashes to school because it's too dangerous to do so. Kailicha is on fire.
Even though large parts of the city have been affected by the taxi strike, here in the center of town, the CBD, things may seem a little bit quiet as many people haven't been able to get to their place of work. Aside from that, it's business as usual. Here in Company Gardens, people are relaxing after work, feeding the pigeons, enjoying the day. On my side, because I live in town, I was able to walk to my office. I could have chosen to work from home, and those of us with the privilege of having a car are still moving around freely.
That gives us a brief idea on what our beautiful city of Cape Town went through during the taxi strike and how critical it is to have infrastructures in place. Now, joining me to discuss the issue and representing Ndifunda Ikwazi is Nikelwa Maqula. Good evening and welcome.
Oh, thank you, Lukman, for having me.
It's my pleasure.
Also, good evening to the viewers at home.
Thank you so much. And then also joining us via Zoom is Professor Ivan Turok from the University of Free State. Prof, good evening and welcome.
Good evening and thanks very much for the invitation to be with you this evening.
Thanks very much. Nikelwa, let's start with you. Now, indeed, the taxi strike seems to have provided a moment of reckoning where we confront the reality that our transportation infrastructure often fails those of us that actually need it the most. But we can look beyond the challenges and consider, potential solutions. In your view, what do you think those solutions can be offered?
Well, if you look at the recent events that transpired during the industrial action that was taken by the people who operate the taxi industry, was that we're living in a society where government, first of all, has absconded from its duties. And to counter that absconding, they impose bylaws that are not in the interest of the poor, are not in the interest of the marginalized, are not in the interest of the majority of the citizens of this country. Because if you look at some of these, the bone of contention in the taxi strike was the bylaws that was imposed on the taxi drivers, and we cannot run away from the fact that when it comes to passing bylaws, there's an instance where government has to go back to the people and include them. And that is, it's what they're calling public participation, but that doesn't happen. Even if it does happen, it's just a tick the box exercise where they go, but the inputs or the interventions of the communities are not taken into considerations. Hence, we're sitting. That what transpired, those 7 or 8 days that came about here in Cape Town was just a ticking time bomb. It was inevitable. It was something that was meant to happen because City of Cape Town does not consider its citizens. It only cares for those that have money. If you are poor, you are regarded as a criminal.
So we know the alternatives, obviously taking buses, taking trains, taking Ubers, e-hailing services, but that was affected as well.
Yes.
Not so much the trains, but more the buses were burned. Ubers were set alight during the strike as well, which a lot of people have various opinions about.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that is that the action itself was not properly organized, because had it been properly organized, what the violence that transpired or it being hijacked, in my opinion, by thugs wouldn't have happened. Because you need to know that whenever such an action, some people will see it as an opportunity to either go loot, to either go burn down infrastructure, or to commit criminal activities, because now the police were focusing on guarding buses. Other services were left neglected. Hence, you saw now people were looting, because there was looting in Khayelitsha, where I came from, where a spa was looted, a goal was looted, and other attempted looting also were about to happen. So it was that a situation that we're dealing with. The strike got hijacked by thugs, but we need to stop this notion of illegitimizing when people take action and things happen, because obviously whenever people take actions, there will be those secondary or those opportunists who will want to take over or change and or give a bad narrative to what the people are trying to advocate for.
Of course. Prof, I'd like to bring you in on this point as well. In terms, Santaco has basically distanced themselves from some of the violence that the taxi strike has incited in the beautiful city of Cape Town. Unfortunately now the city is left with repairing some of the damage. What are your thoughts on this, Prof?
Yes, there's been a very serious issue for Cape Town and for the country as a whole. I don't think anybody comes out of this very well. There's been a lot of damage done to the immediate situation, infrastructure, vehicle set alight, as you said, damage to the reputation of the city, damage to our international tourist industry through some of the actions that have happened, people dying. And so I think we need a really serious reflection on this episode and learn a lot of lessons from it, actually, because nobody has behaved, as I said, perfectly well here. Both sides in the dispute should have discussed and resolved the problem much sooner without getting to the point of a violent action. It's really unacceptable. And it's not a good story for South Africa if we can't resolve these kinds of problems. We do have, obviously, these are deep-seated issues. I don't know whether you want to go into in a bit more depth, the underlying nature of the problem, the spatial distance between jobs and housing that most people suffer from. That's the underlying cause of this, leading people to be vulnerable to being exploited by the taxi industry and other operators. If we could sort out our terrible geography of the city, that would help in many ways this kind of problem, right? Of course, it's not a short-term, no quick fix there, but we've got to start working on tackling the apartheid geography of Cape Town more seriously.
But I think it also highlighted the fact that there are massive holes in the system, and the taxi strike exposed that very clearly as well, with regards to the inadequacy that our country faces on a daily basis as well. We're going to go for an ad break. When we come back, we chat to Professor and Nikelwa in studio about a very, very worrying problem that we have in our beautiful city. You are still watching Hilaal Live. Thanks very much for joining us on Hilaal Live, Channel 347 on DSTV. We're talking about spatial mismatch and public transport. We all know about the worrying strike that happened in Cape Town over the last 2 weeks, and the aftermath that is now left behind as well. There are still issues that haven't been resolved between Sentako and the city, and we're going to try and delve into that as well. In studio, I have Nikelwa Maqula and also Professor Ivan Turok, who is joining us via Zoom as well. Thanks very much, Nikelwa, and Prof for joining us. Prof, I want to ask very quickly as well, are we blaming spatial apartheid for the taxi violence? What is your thoughts on this?
It's a good question. And it's not the whole problem, right? It's part of the problem. And it's a very serious matter, as I mentioned. It's not just and that's serious enough. The serious transport burden that the poor face in Cape Town, long journeys to work, people spending up to 40% of their income on traveling to get a job. It's really very, very problematic. But of course, there are a whole lot of other issues about the governance of the public transport sector, about the fragmented nature of the public transport system, different responsibilities at different spheres of government, national, provincial, local. There isn't a coherent transport system is at the root of the problem, right? We need to sort that out because the different spheres, the different entities aren't working together well. PRASA is not managing the railway network effectively. The bus network doesn't talk to the taxi industry. We should have an integrated system where the minibuses provide a kind of feeder service, a local feeder service, not this traveling up and down the freeways at 150 kilometers an hour. That's ridiculous. That should be a local service. The main bulk of passengers should be carried by the rail network and the bus system. And we need to get more people out of their cars onto public transport to reduce congestion and emissions and all that sort of thing.
I agree with you completely. And unfortunately, you're right. We don't have a cohesive transport system and a reliable one for that matter. In order for commuters to get out of their cars, we then have the safety issue of traveling late at night. It's a ripple effect that's been coming on for years as well. But I want to come back to Nikelwa as well. As a housing activist, do you resonate with some of the issues with law enforcement that the taxis that they've raised over the last couple of weeks? Or in your experience, has law enforcement been much better at this?
You see, when what had happened, the incident when those videos that were going on viral, at what had happened in town when we saw law enforcement officials smashing windows of taxis, that evoked some sort an emotion with me because it took me back when it was COVID. People were occupying land because they either had to, they were at the risk of being homeless because they could no longer afford rent. Many Cape Townians were subjected to that. So people opted to go and occupy land. Law enforcement was not nice to the people. Law enforcement was very brutal to the people. And there was an incident where there was a viral video of a comrade of mine, Comrade Bulelani Kolani, who was dragged out of his house naked. So when I saw those videos, I was so emotional. It evoked an emotion to me because it was like a repetition of what had happened in 2020, where a lot of people's homes were demolished, and we all know how government is dragging its feet when it comes to providing housing to the people. So when people now were occupying, they responded with brutal force instead of meeting the people come halfway and trying to come up with an amicable solution to this question of housing. And what I've noticed is that there's a gap between the government and the people.
Right.
A huge gap, whether it's national government, provincial or local government. There's a huge gap between the government and the people. And government has this tendency of, if you as a community, you organize and you you try to meet them halfway or come up or make suggestions or interventions out of solving a particular problem, they see it as an attack, of which that shouldn't be the case.
Of course.
That shouldn't be the case. Government is by the people, and it should be for the people. So government, we should find a way of having a space where government and people meet and we come up with workable solutions.
Of course.
Because government is the people.
Absolutely. And we've elected those officials
Exactly.
as part of our communities as well. Professor Ivan, I want to bring you in at this time, at this point as well. Speaking about housing, we seem to have an influx over the last many years into the Cape area. Can Cape Town handle this influx, or is this part of the problem that we seem to be facing?
It's a very common question that you've raised, that, we've got a problem. We can't cope people moving to the city. They want to come to our beautiful city.
Yeah.
And we should try and, manage that.
Of course.
Hopefully keep them down. But look, we can't go back to the past. We can't put up border controls and restrictions. If people want to move here, they have a constitutional right
Absolutely.
to move here. And we have to do our best to accommodate them here. And that is not easy. It's a big challenge. But we need resources. We need the support of provincial and national government to help the city to accommodate more people in decent conditions. We need to provide land in advance of settlement, not just have people occupying anywhere, higgledy-piggledy, causing chaos, but we need to prepare the ground for urban growth.
Of course.
The city is going to accommodate another 1 million people, the projections suggest, over the next 15 years or so. We have to plan ahead for that. We can't just react after the event. We have to accept it's going to happen. Any decent city around the world is growing because people want to move to cities for the jobs and the amenities and the services. That's a healthy phenomenon.
Yeah.
The economy will benefit indeed from the concentration of activity and people and firms and resources within cities. It's more efficient to deliver public services in cities.
Of course.
So we need to work with the grain of where people want to go and accommodate them in decent conditions with schools and housing and jobs and other public services, and not sort of try to push back the tidal wave and pretend that we can stop urbanization.
Of course. Nikelwa, we have a massive housing backlog, not just in Cape Town, throughout South Africa as well. There's no way that the city, let's be fair, is going to accommodate the backlog overnight. But for those people that are waiting for the backlog, waiting for housing, waiting to be accommodated, how do they cope at the moment? What is your advice to them?
First of all, what we need is transparency in the housing waiting list. Because for me, it does not make sense that an old Danny in Manenberg staying in a backyard for 40 years and being in the housing waiting list for 40 years does not receive a house, yet a 35-year-old receives a house in Heiderveld. It does not make sense. The city of Cape Town needs to make transparent the housing waiting list. Provincial government needs to make transparent the housing waiting list. So we need transparency in everything. And also because the Human Settlement Department, national government, is going to review its housing policy, in human settlement policy, they need to also take into consideration and implement what is there in that housing policy. Because the problem with South Africa is that we have policies, we have a constitution that is regarded as being progressive, yet that constitution, it's as good as nothing because it's just there for decoration. It's an ornament. So we need to have implementation strategies, not just nice policies on paper, but we need to also be able to implement those respective policies. Because our constitution is full of policies that is not being implemented.
True. I agree.
It's not implemented.
Yeah. How do people get hold of you if they'd like to, come to you guys and chat about some of the inequalities that they've been going through? What are the best methods?
Our website, Ndifunukwazi, at Ndifunukwazi. .co.za.
Okay, fantastic. Or you can check them out on some of the good socials
Yes.
and search for some of the information as well. I know there's a number 062 352 9372 or the Indufuna Ikwazi Facebook page as well.
Yes.
That's also quite accessible. Nikelwa, thanks so much for coming in. Really appreciate it. Housing
Thanks for having
activist. Keep up the good fight, and we look forward to chatting to you again. Prof, thanks so much for joining us on Zoom. We really look forward to chatting to you again about some of the crucial issues. I think we're going to do a series of this over the next couple of weeks, and would love to join you for you to join us on that as well.
Very much.
My pleasure. And that's how we end the session for today on Hilaal Live. Thanks for watching on Channel 347. We'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. I hope that you could join us then as well. From the Cape Town crew, Sohail Barnes and myself, Luqman Shadrack, have a lovely evening. Assalamu alaikum.